Hey extraordinary people, I'm Daniel and today we're going to talk about Morbius. Morbius is the latest Spider-Man spin-off film from Sony. This film is not part of the MCU, nor is it produced by Marvel or Disney, but it is set in the broader multiverse of the MCU, in the same universe as Sony's Venom films. Morbius is directed by Daniel Espinosa and stars Jared Leto as Dr. Michael Morbius, a doctor with a rare blood disease that requires him to take 3 blood transfusions every day in order to survive. He comes up with a potential cure that involves fusing bat DNA to his own DNA, and decides to test it on himself. But of course it goes horribly wrong, and he turns into a vampire-human hybrid with an insatiable craving for human blood, without which he will lose control and go on a blood-fueled rampage. So I'm just gonna get right to the point. Morbius is one of the worst superhero films I've ever seen in my life. This entire movie is just recycled concepts from other films. The characters here are paper thin. Michael Morbius has no personality, nothing to make him the least bit interesting. To quote the late great Roger Ebert, to call him cardboard would be an insult to a useful packing material. And the villain in this film is just as bad. He's just basically a mirror image of Michael Morbius. He's just another guy who gets the same powers as Morbius and turns evil. There's nothing else to his character. Now I don't blame the actors for this. Jared Leto is a very talented actor. Matt Smith, who plays the villain, is great. But this movie doesn't give them anything to do. At least Venom, which was a bad movie in many ways, let Tom Hardy go crazy in that role, and the movie was entertaining as a result. This movie doesn't give its actors room to do anything interesting with their characters. All the performances feel held back. So after he becomes a vampire, Morbius realizes that he now has some special superpowers. But instead of showing us a cool action-based scene where Morbius learns his powers and tests out what he can do, we just see him sit in a lab and tell us what his powers are through voiceover. It's the most boring, laziest, unimaginative way they could have done that scene. So Morbius learns that as a vampire, he has to drink human blood, or this synthetic blood that he's conveniently invented, or else he'll lose control and start killing people. And he also learns that the synthetic blood he's drinking will only last so long. After a certain point, he'll have to drink real human blood. So how do you think the movie solves this interesting moral conundrum it set up? It doesn't! Halfway through, the movie just totally drops this plot point and we never hear about it again. He can just suddenly control himself with no explanation. The writers didn't even bother to solve the problem they set up. There's no consequences. There's no payoff. I don't want to spoil anything, but honestly there's nothing here to spoil because nothing even happens in this movie. Morbius becomes a vampire, his friend becomes an evil vampire, they fight, end of story, nothing happens. Now you may be thinking, I don't care about the story or characters. I just want to see some cool superhero action. Well, if that's the case, you're going to hate this movie because first of all, there's barely any action in it, and second of all, the action that is here is terribly filmed and you can't tell what's going on at all. They film the action with such extreme close-ups and hyperactive quick cutting, and there's always something flying around the screen like dust or mist or smoke or something, so you can't even tell what's going on. You can't even tell what you're seeing on screen. Now in the opening scene of this movie, Morbius travels to South America to get some vampire bats for his experiments. He walks up to the mouth of a cave, pulls out a knife, and cuts himself right across the palm of his hand, which is stupid for like a million different reasons. If you really needed to get blood for some reason, that's literally the worst place to get it from. Wouldn't you want to use your hand afterwards, or wouldn't you cut like your arm or something? So he holds up his bloody hand, and all these vampire bats just swarm out of the cave at him. And I was just like, do these filmmakers know anything about vampire bats? Vampire bats are not these vicious attack monsters that all movies seem to portray them as. They're actually really docile, timid animals. They only attack animals that are asleep. They'll land on the ground away from the animal and then slowly crawl up to it. They don't suck blood. They'll cut a very small hole with their teeth and then lick the blood up. And they'll never drink enough blood to actually kill an animal. The biggest danger here, of course, is getting an infection or a disease from them. Now I know most people don't care about this kind of thing, but I do because I love animals and I hate it when movies portray them inaccurately. Speaking of which, Morbius keeps his bats in a giant glass tube in his house. There's nothing in there for them to perch on, nothing to sit on, nothing for them to eat or drink. It's just a giant glass tube that the bats are just like flying around in. At one point in the movie, he walks into the tube and he's just like, they've accepted me as a brother. It's so stupid. So this movie has no story, paper-thin characters, terrible action. The movie even looks terrible. The colors are dull and drab, and the cinematography is just flat and uninteresting. There isn't even any good humor in this movie. I didn't laugh at all. Honestly, the only reason this movie even exists is because Sony has convinced themselves that they have to set up a cinematic universe that can rival the MCU. But they still haven't realized that the movies themselves have to be good. No one is going to want to see a Sinister Six movie if we don't care about the characters in the Sinister Six. But Sony apparently hasn't learned this lesson. They don't realize that you have to make a movie that's good on its own. They just want to make movies so they can set up more movies and get more IP and sell toys and make money and start a franchise and make a cinematic universe and do basically anything except make movies that people actually want to watch. And as a result, this movie just feels like a corporate product. It doesn't feel like a movie that was made by human beings. It feels like it was made by robots on an assembly line. It totally sucks and fails on every possible level. Guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, Morbius gets a 1. Yeah, this movie disappointed me on every possible level. Alright, have you seen Morbius? What do you think about it? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me a like, subscribe, and remember that you're extraordinary. I love all of you so much. Bye. 'Cause you're extraordinary. Yes, you know it's true. Extraordinary. That's why I love